Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're getting into one of the big ones, the Imperial Fists, real cornerstones of the Warhammer 40K universe.
Absolutely. Foundational, you could say. The Semp Legion. Stalwart, iconic. Yellow.
Yeah, very yellow. So our mission today is to really unpack them, look at the sources, figure out their origins, what they believe, those unique traditions.
Their successors, like the Black Templars, which is a whole thing in itself.
Exactly. And what they've actually done in the Imperium, their big moments, and of course, how they play on the tabletop.
Right. It's sort of a crash course in understanding what makes these guys tick.
And there's more than you might think, isn't there? That stubborn Primarch, Rogal Dorn, but also this, hidden anger beneath the surface. It's fascinating stuff.
Definitely more than just castle builders. Let's get into it.
Okay, so setting the scene. Warhammer 40,000,
Yes.
Huge universe. Where do the Imperial Fists fit right at the start?
Well, they're one of the original 20 Space Marine Legions, the F Legion, created by the Emperor himself during the Great Crusade.
And their Primarch, Rogal Dorn. You mentioned stubborn. Tell us a bit about him.
Oh, Dorn. Yeah, stubborn is probably an understatement. Conservative, deeply loyal, incredibly dutiful. But the really interesting thing, he was apparently very self-aware.
Self-aware how? Like he knew he was stubborn.
Sort of, yeah. The sources suggest he knew his strategies could be predictable, that he was rigid. Which raises a cool question, right? How do you operate when you know your own limitations like that?
That is interesting. Does it mean he sometimes changed tack or just doubled down?
Mostly doubled down, honestly. But that self-awareness meant maybe, just maybe, he could see when something really wasn't working or grudgingly accept a different approach if the logic was undeniable, like during the Ulanor Crusade. He had his way, but he could adapt coldly and pragmatically to win.
Cold pragmatism within the stubbornness. Okay. And their main job, their whole identity really is being the Castellans in Terra, right?
Exactly. The ultimate defenders of the solar system, of Terra itself. That famous yellow armor is practically synonymous with defending the Emperor's home.
And that role directly leads to their expertise.
Absolutely. It's all about unyielding defense, strategic siege warfare, fortification, resilience, holding the line no matter what. They dig in, they don't move. That's the Imperial Fist way.
Makes sense. So let's dig into their beliefs, their traditions.
Yeah.
Because beneath that stoic, fortress-like exterior, there's some depth.
Right. On the surface, it's pure stoicism, unwavering loyalty to the Emperor, absolute dedication.
But there's a nuance there about how they view the Emperor, isn't there, compared to some other chapters?
Yes, and it's a really important distinction. They see the Emperor as, the founder, the ultimate general, the master of mankind. But they don't worship him as a literal god.
Not like the Black Templars, for example.
Exactly. The Black Templars are full-on divine worship, the Imperial Fists, deep reverence, absolute loyalty, but not divinity. It generally doesn't cause massive friction, though, because, while everyone's fighting the same enemies, shared goals kind of smooth over those theological bumps.
Okay, that's clear. But then there's this other side. This hatred and anger mentioned in the sources. That seems counter to the stoic image.
It does, but it's there. It's not like Khorne berserker rage. It's controlled.
Yeah.
A deep, simmering anger directed at failure, betrayal, incompetence. Basically anyone who lets the Emperor down significantly.
So it's a righteous fury, unleashed only when things get really bad.
Precisely. When enough bubs happens, as one source puts it, that stoicism cracks and they unleash that fury. And then there's the tradition of chaining their weapons to their arms.
Ah, yes, the chains. Where'd that come from?
It actually started with Sigismund, their first captain, during the Great Crusade. He saw the loyal world eaters fighting before they, went totally off the rails and was impressed by their commitment.
So he adopted it.
He did. And for the Imperial Fists, it became this powerful symbol, a physical vow. We don't drop our weapons, we don't yield until the fight is completely done. It's literally binding themselves to the battle.
Wow. So this mix, the stoicism, the hidden controlled rage, the absolute commitment symbolized by the chains.
Yeah.
What does that create in terms of their warrior culture?
It creates warriors of incredible discipline and resilience. They use things like the pain glove, these devices or rituals involving intense pain endurance.
Ouch. Why?
It's not punishment. It's about testing will, sharpening resolve, building tolerance for suffering. It helps them master that inner fury, channel it. So you get this blend. Unshakable discipline, the ability to endure almost anything, and, when needed, this terrifyingly focused righteous destruction.
Okay, that paints a vivid picture. Now let's shift gears. The Horus Heresy ends, the Imperium is shattered,
Yeah.
and Guilliman introduces the Codex Astartes.
Big changes. Huge changes.
Wow.
And Dorn, well, he wasn't exactly thrilled about breaking up his legion into smaller chapters.
His stubbornness again.
Yep, he resisted. He believed the legion's unified strength was vital, but then things got complicated. There was this whole plot by Perturabo, his arch-rival, Primarch of the Iron Warriors.
Oh, the Iron Warriors versus Imperial Fists rivalry is legendary. What happened?
Perturabo basically sent Dorn plans for this supposedly impenetrable fortress, the Eternal Fortress. Knowing Dorn's obsession with siegecraft, he knew Dorn wouldn't resist trying to crack it.
A trap.
A brutal one. The Imperial Fists threw themselves at it and got absolutely hammered, almost wiped out. It was only after this massive loss and getting help from Guilliman's Ultramarines that Dorn finally, painfully agreed to implement the Codex.
Wow, so it took near annihilation and a rival's scheming to get him to comply. That led to their first successor chapters, right? The famous ones?
The first two, yeah. The Black Templars and the Crimson Fists.
Let's talk Black Templars first. They seem quite different.
Very different. They came from the Imperial Fists' elite first company, the Templars, led by Sigismund him again. He became their first High Marshal, and crucially, they got their own separate codex.
Making them basically an independent faction like Space Wolves or Blood Angels.
Exactly. They went full zealot, worshipping the Emperor, embracing this endless crusade mentality, a completely distinct path from the main Imperial Fists.
And the Crimson Fists.
They stayed much closer to the parent chapter's views on the Emperor reverence, not worship. Similar to other successors like the Nova Marines, they're known for their resilience, often facing overwhelming odds, tragically suffering near extinction more than once.
Do they have the Emperor's champion like the Templars?
Sources mention they have had one, yeah, but it's not as central to their identity as it is for the Black Templars.
So a really diverse lineage stemming from Dorn's Legion, the Templars really carving out their own niche.
Absolutely. Shows how one legion's core ideas can splinter and evolve in really different directions.
Okay, moving on to their biggest contributions. The Imperial Fists have been around forever, basically. What are some key moments where they really shaped Imperial history?
Well, one absolutely massive one is the War of the Beast. This was an orc invasion on a scale that threatened the entire Imperium, just catastrophic.
Worse than Ulanor.
Arguably, yeah, in terms of the immediate threat to Terra. And Chapter Master Corland of the Imperial Fists was central to turning it around. He realized the big frontal assaults weren't working.
So what did he do?
He proposed something new. Small, specialized kill teams of Astartes to infiltrate and take out key orc leaders and infrastructure. Strategic strikes instead of just blunt force.
Like special forces.
Pretty much. And here's the really fascinating part. The first recruits for these teams, they came from survivors of Corland's own earlier actions on Ulanor. He essentially laid the groundwork, the prototype, for what became the Death Watch.
No way. So the Imperial Fist basically invented the Death Watch.
The concept, yeah. Corland's insight was pivotal, and Imperial Fists still contribute Marines to the Death Watch today. It's a direct legacy.
That's incredible. We also touched on the Horus Heresy earlier, that bitter cooperation with the Space Wolves during the Siege of Terra.
Right. Talk about oil and water. The disciplined Fists and the Wild Wolves. Forced to work together against chaos. Lots of friction, mutual dislike of methods, but they held the line when it mattered most. Shows the Imperium needs all kinds, even if they don't get along.
And this all ties back to their history, fighting orcs, even before the War of the Beast.
Oh, yeah. The Ulanor Crusade itself, way back, led by the Emperor. That was a defining moment, shattering a massive orc empire. The Imperial Fists were key players there, too. They have a very long, very bloody history with orcs.
Okay, so we've got the lore, the history, the big moments. How does this translate to the tabletop game Warhammer 40,000? Are they still the ultimate defenders?
Pretty much, yeah. Their rules really lean into that identity. They are fundamentally arranged army, masters of the bolter, siege warfare, holding the line. That's their game.
So what are their strengths? If I'm playing as them, what do I get?
You get excellent defensive capabilities. They often get buffs for staying still, representing digging in. Their main thing is making bolters and similar weapons much more effective, like ignoring the benefits of light cover for enemy units they shoot at.
Oh, that's huge in a game with lots of terrain.
It really is. It forces your opponent out into the open, or means their cover just doesn't help much. And then there's the infamous bolter drill rules that generate extra shots or hits. It can be an absolute avalanche of firepower. Plus, they're generally tough, good at holding objectives, hard to shift.
Sounds strong. What about the downsides? Where do they struggle?
Well, that specialization is also a weakness. They can be less flexible than some other armies. If the battle requires fast movement, rapid redeployment, or if they get caught in close combat unexpectedly, they can struggle.
So mobility isn't their strong suit.
Generally not. They want you to come to the prepared firing lines. If you can outmaneuver them, get around their guns, or tie them up in melee, you can mitigate their strength. Also, sometimes their specific units or upgrades can be a bit pricey in terms of points cost.
So the playstyle is definitely defensive, strategic, sit back and shoot.
Largely, yes. Prioritizing firepower, durability, controlling zones, dig in, fortify, create kill zones, and dare the enemy to advance. It's very thematic.
And you mentioned something interesting earlier. Despite being so foundational, they don't have their own standalone rulebook, like the Black Templars or Space Wolves.
That's right. Currently, they primarily use the main Space Marine Codex with their specific chapter rules layered on top, which is, a bit surprising for a chapter with such a long history and distinct identity. Some players feel they deserve their own full book.
Yeah, that is interesting. Okay, well, that pretty much wraps up our deep dive into the Imperial Fists. We've covered a lot from Dorn and the defensive Terra, that stoic exterior hiding a controlled fury.
The weapon chaining, the pain glove, the split that created the Templars and Crimson Fists.
Their role in the War of the Beast, basically inventing the Death Watch concept, and how they play on the tabletop as resilient masters of siege.
They really do embody that idea of unyielding resilience and strategic defense, don't they?
Absolutely, both in the stories and how they function in the game.
And looking at the bigger picture, I think they show how loyalty isn't monolithic. It can be quiet stoicism, fierce defense, or even that controlled, righteous anger. And you really see how one Primarch's personality, Dorn's stubbornness and duty, echoed down through millennia, shaping chapters, shaping history.
Yeah, absolutely. So a final thought for you, our listeners, to chew on. In a universe like 40K, just constant, brutal war, what does being a defender truly mean? Is it about preventing the damage, or is it about enduring it, holding the line until the absolute bitter end, no matter the cost? How would you define defense when faced with impossible odds? What would you endure?
Heavy thought stand on.
Indeed. Well, that's all the time we have for this deep dive. Thanks so much for tuning in.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
If you enjoyed exploring the Imperial Fists with us, please do share this deep dive with a friend or fellow hobbyist. And hitting that subscribe button means you won't miss our next exploration. Until then, keep digging deep.